I'm excited to welcome Rotimi to join for conversation. MSC NBC contributor, current law student, and former Capitol Hill junkie. So excited to get his take on all things happening in the party, in our government. Want to just introduce yourselves, folks, for a minute?
Hi, everyone. My name's Rotimi. I'm a MSNBC contributor. Back in the day, I was working at the ACLU as an advisor working on their voting rights work. And then I was on Capitol Hill working for Senator Bob Casey and Congressman Dan Kildee. And funny enough, I actually started working, wow, this is going to date me a little bit. I started working for Senator Bob Casey during the first shutdown of the Trump administration. And so, really, what is happening now? I've seen it before, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the weeds of this shutdown, how it's happening, how long it's going to go for, and what I think Democrats are doing right in this moment, and what I think they can build on to really make sure that the people of the country understand that this is on the Republican Party 100%.
Yeah, and so it seems like so far they think so, at least. How long do you think the shutdown will last? And I guess the big question is, do you think Republicans, through dishonest messaging and sort of the media ecosystem they've built, will be able to change the narrative or win the narrative over the next several weeks if the government remains shut down?
So I think the biggest issue is that the Republicans for the last couple months have basically been saying that they are in control of everything and the Democratic Party is weak and useless. That's really been their whole message. So now that they're in control of everything and everything that they're in control of is completely failing, it's going to be very hard for them to shift the blame off themselves. You're already seeing Republicans like JD Vance come out and spread lies saying that Republicans or Democrats, excuse me, are trying to keep the government closed to fund health care for illegal immigrants, which is a complete lie. The reality is that the reason why we actually can get health care right now for undocumented people is because of a line signed by Reagan in 1986 called EMLATA. Folks, look it up at home. Basically, what this law says is that when you go to the hospital doesn't need to check if you're a citizen or not. They can just give you care because at that point, Republicans in a lot of the country believed that it was immoral and wrong to let someone bleed out in a hospital room and ask them for their passport. And that was just something that was common sense. It's like, obviously, we're going to
And
take care
even
of.
I think even less so about morality. I think the idea was to protect American citizens who would also have to wait and have their insurance verified and all of that and their status verified and et cetera. In that time, you could die. So
Yeah.
it's really a practical policy choice.
Yeah, it's like I don't for everyone listening, if you get to the hospital, you don't want to spend time fumbling around in your pocket trying to get your passport, trying to get your social security card, and then in the midst of a crisis, you may have forgot it, and then you're sitting there, you got to go back home and get it, and then you only get sicker and sicker. So that policy was put in place by Ronald Reagan because it was just common sense. And now you have people like JD Vance, of course, lying because that's all he can do, spreading this notion that that law is basically in place, one, to give free healthcare to illegal immigrants. And the reason that the Democrats are advancing is because they want to do that, which is just another lie. And so I think what you're seeing is scrambling. They're scrambling now because their approvals are in the shitter. They're scrambling because they realize this is the only thing they have. Immigration is really the only issue they notice in the polling where there's this bit of a jump they have on Democrats. It's the only place that they feel like they can have some success to talk about.
Are you optimistic? So I see the one lane that I think could work for Republicans on this is it is a lie. And at first I was kind of like, wow, it's kind of interesting to hedge their entire argument against the shutdown on a clearly debunkable lie that I think a lot of Democrats have done a good job laying out the facts, just like you did. At the same time, I feel like so many people don't pay attention, and what they see is the snippets on social media. At times, Democrats have said they support healthcare for undocumented folks here, and especially that was a topic on the 2020 debate stage. So I've seen them sort of desperately chopping together and clipping together any and all past statements on this topic possible. Are they going to be able to sort of convince people that this is a policy that Democrats support, regardless of whether it's tied specifically to this shutdown, and sort of just muddy the waters, blur the lines there, or is there sort of clarity that that's not what's happening?
I think this depends on how aggressively and how much Democrats articulate that the reason that they are in support of a government shutdown is because the fact of the matter is Republicans are shutting down the government because of ACA healthcare subsidies and because they don't want to fund rural hospitals.
Mhm.
But I think if Democrats keep repeating those facts, they're going to be fine, and we're honestly going to reach a place in likely a couple of weeks where both parties can, and this sounds crazy now, but both parties can sit down, come to an agreement to fund the government, and we can reopen things. But I think the American people are going to ultimately see the truth here, given the fact that Republicans have been saying for so long, really since the president got sworn in, that this is their government, they're in control, they're doing everything, they're sending mass police officers into the street, they're doing all this stuff. They have control. So,
Right.
I think in the past and what we're going to see now is the party that is in power is held responsible for the shutdown.
And I think, by the way, everything Trump is doing, targeting, blue states with sort of retribution over this, with Russ Voigt, all of that really puts it squarely in their camp. So, in terms of messaging, I know leading up to this, there was a lot of frustration with Schumer and Jeffries, and I think folks are happy that they went forward with the shutdown. I know there's been some sort of coverage in legacy media that perhaps it was the sort of progressive caucus that forced Schumer's hand. I don't see it that way at all. It seemed like this was really a fight that, moderate Dems all the way to the left wanted at this point because they feel like Democrats haven't necessarily used all of their tools and all their leverage. So I'm wondering if you see it that way. But I'm also wondering sort of the messaging leading up to this, where you saw folks like Schumer and Jeffrey say maybe Republicans will do the right thing, or where they did go meet with Trump and, have those photos with those 2028 hats. Are they handling it correctly? Did you see that kitty video that went viral and got a lot of play? And what do you think of that? And then I guess just more generally, is this going to be a win for Democrats, a neutral? How can they make it a win?
I think on the issue of messaging, one thing that is tough for, I think, Democratic leadership right now is for whatever reason, they just have not been able to find their motion and kind of find that sweet spot where they're able to communicate really well. For Trump, that is going on a podium and just rambling for hours and hours. And then his team can clip up those videos into nice little clips to make it seem like he's actually competent, and so that's where he does well. And JD Vance does really well when he's on Twitter or social media and he writes these long posts. You can tell he's like really building out this argument. And so that's where he functions well. When you look at Akeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, and I'm saying this as someone that used to work in communications, they don't really have a place where they feel like they focus really well. Schumer back in the 90s, if you actually go on YouTube, he was very, very good at giving congressional floor speeches. Like that's where he would shine. He was really quick. He had great sound bites, and for some reason, that is not where he shines anymore. And Akeem Jeffries has kind of been a little all over the place. And so I think my advice for them, as someone that wants to see Democrats succeed, is they need to figure out what type of communications makes the most sense for them and succeed in that. Because I think you have a lot of people right now saying they need to be making TikToks every day. They need
Right.
to go on a podcast. Hakeem Jeffrey needs to start a podcast. Schumer needs to start a podcast. And it's like that sounds like the right thing. But ultimately, if they start a podcast and they're not saying anything that resonates with anyone, then they should have done it in the first place. And so
Right.
there needs to be an active effort. And you've seen it a little bit, but if I was, in that comp shop, I would really be spending time with the principals, Hakeem, Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, saying, where do you feel like you actually are reaching people? And the ideas that you want to articulate are actually touching people. So that's what I'd say about that. You mentioned a really funny video that's going on around online for folks who don't know, which is basically these like animated kittens describing the government shutdown. And I think a lot of people are unfairly criticizing it. The
Yeah.
reason being is when you go on TikTok or actually any of these social media apps and you look at the top videos across any issue, it's videos like that of animations, of cartoons, of people talking in these really quirky and weird voices, and they may not resonate with me and you. Like if I saw that video, I'd scroll right past it, and maybe some other folks here would do the same. But there are a lot of people that's how they communicate in this digital environment. So if Democrats actually want to reach people where they are, they need to be making content that is reaching people where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it got like 500,000 likes. I feel like also Democrats kind of have to tune out sort of the negativity at some point because they have to try new things. And at the end of the day, the Ken Klippenstein sort of genre of online personality is going to bash and mock whatever they do. So I know a lot of people, especially sort of more the Dem socialist online voice, kind of was like, oh, this is how Democrats fail and whatever. You looked at the video, it performed incredibly well. It got 3 million views. It definitely succeeded in going viral and making a simple point. And by the way, even if it is like a little cringe, the fact that it got served to so many people and shared so many times, the message does get out there. And at the end of the day, the goal is not to be the coolest account ever or the most popular. It's like we want people to hear these messages. So I do think that's an interesting dynamic. I think with Schumer and Jeffries, the idea of them having a podcast, it's like, I don't think people want to hear from them more. If anything, every time you watch them, they are so careful. They are so slow in this environment. They don't bring in a room and meeting them and everything, they're super charismatic people. And obviously they have a lot of gravitas. But on TV, on social media, it doesn't translate. And I think, if anything, that's when you lean into your digital and social team because, frankly, they could post a lot of stuff without you. So, like, everyone wants everyone to copy Gavin Newsom. I don't see that being the case because I think you really have to have sort of an authentic vibe, like you're saying. What works for some people doesn't work for others. But like, and I think we're seeing that a bit with our governor here, Kathy Hochul has one of those press offices now. And it hasn't gotten the following or the traction that Newsom's has. At the same time, I do think somewhat rapid response approach could be needed, and we're not seeing that yet. Do you think that they should endorse Mamdani, Jeffries, and Schumer? Talk a little bit about that. I think the frame being with all this in mind, because I think three things were happening at once. Sort of the shutdown fight coming off of Trump's, unfortunate budget bill, where maybe the messaging didn't really pierce through. And I do think this shutdown's a second opportunity for Democrats to nail that messaging. You also had Democrats sort of wishy-washy on how to handle the Charlie Kirk situation, where I think a lot of people in Congress found it difficult to say bad guy who said terrible things, and yet political violence is totally unacceptable. This is a dark thing to happen in our country, and either went overboard and said, voted for a resolution to basically honor him, which I think was an interesting moment. Again, sort of inconsistent with the story and messaging that folks have been telling about people like Kirk, which I think was a true story and message. And then at the same time, you have sort of Schumer and Jeffries every week doing these interviews where they refuse and they sort of equivocate and they delay. Are they going to endorse Zoran Mamdani, Democratic nominee for mayor in New York City? I just think any of those that you pick, it's all the same behavior of sort of, it comes across weak, it comes across disorganized, it comes across indecisive. So what do you make of that? Maybe that's a wrong analysis and they should be that cautious and they have a better plan and I'm just not tuned to it. But sell us on. What do you think?
No, so when I was in high school, I used to play a lot of basketball, and my coach to us would say all the time, if you're going to take a 3-pointer, take the damn 3-pointer. Don't sit there and go, I got defense. I got someone coming. I got to take the damn shot. And I think that's what's going on with the Zoran Mondani endorsement. The more they equivocate, the more weird it looks to everyone. Because then you have people saying, why aren't you just supporting the Democratic nominee? That's one group of people. We have another group of people saying, oh, I live in XYZ purple state. I don't feel like Zoran supports my views of the Democratic Party. And then now you guys aren't even taking my side. You guys are doing this weird middle ground thing. And so what I think they need to do is just endorse him, because once they do that, everyone will just move on. He's a Democratic nominee. He's incredibly popular in a blue city. He's bringing in new voters to the party. You go to look at the New York Times map and where he's winning in New York, and it's a lot of Latino, Black, working class
Mhm.
communities that were really into Donald Trump, but now are saying, I like this Zoran guy.
Right, an interesting
Talking about
dynamic.
affordability, and he's talking about the things that matter to my community. So I think he's doing incredible work. And the reality is maybe his flavor of politics, I'm from Pennsylvania, isn't going to land in Bucks County or Lackawanna County or those purple counties that are really important. The thing is, he's not running in those places. He's running
Yeah.
in New York. He's leading in New York. And folks that are going to run in those purple counties are going to have to come up with their own message that is different from Zoran to speak to those Democrats. So ultimately, we're going to have to let Democrats in every community speak to their community to win. You're never going to have a Democratic Party where everyone agrees on every single issue. And if that were to happen, the Democrats wouldn't be successful. When you look back in the 80s and 90s and some of the and that time period, we had 58, 57 Democrats in the
Mhm.
Senate. And that's really a tough body to get people elected. What you saw is there were Democrats that had wide, broad views, broad opinions on
Right.
different issues, but they were united on economic issues. And I think if we can get back to a place where you let Democrats run their races and do what they need to do to win in those places, and then if someone wins a nomination, say we support them because that's what the voters pick, we're going to get to a better place.
And I guess the counter argument there is if Zoran Mamdani is elected, which I think he of course will be, and he's unsuccessful because a lot of the things he said he either can't do or it would be very hard to do. And especially because in New York State, a lot of the changes that would impact the city need to go through the state. And so you have to basically convince people in upstate New York to raise their own taxes to benefit New York City, which is a very tough sell. I guess he gets elected in 2025. He starts to try to do some of these things unsuccessfully, perhaps because there's so many obstacles in 2026 as Hochul's up for reelection, as she has a Republican challenger. You've now browbeaten Schumer and Jeffries and other Den leadership to get fully behind sort of at least this socialist genre of politics, or at least that would be the national narrative that we see already, folks trying to put on Democrats at a time when it's not clear that that is what is going to win nationally for Democrats after 2024. And then where does that leave the party, I guess, is a question. And maybe the answer is to say that politics is local and that candidates in their local, areas should be supported and the parties there to support them. I guess I'm not one in 2025 to I don't think he needs either of their endorsement, frankly, by the way. So it's kind of just like, why are we having this conversation so much? And of course, we're having it here because it's topical in the news. But what do you make of that sort of line of thinking? Is that totally off?
I think anytime when you have a politician that has a big vision for change, there of course is a honest and blunt reality is what if they don't accomplish it all?
Hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest critiques you see of Obama. He promised that he was going to have universal health care and then he couldn't get the public option through the Senate. So we now have the ACA, which is this subsidy program that works fairly well, but it has a lot of issues. And so when I think people point out that Zoran may not achieve all of his agenda, I think when you ask him that question, I think he's pretty honest that this is something that is a big swath of ideas, and we ultimately have to try to get this done in one term. And if we can't get it done in one term, we're going to try and keep going again. But I think the a point that I want to respond to that I think is important to remember is if Schumer and Jeffries had endorsed Zoran the minute that he won that
Yeah.
nomination, none of this like hypothetical conversation. Everyone would have just forgot about it. They would have
Right.
said he's the Democrat nominee, the Democrat senator, Democrat House leader endorsed the Democrat nominee. So now it's over. And I think that it wouldn't really have been a big deal. But I think the hesitation has now created almost
Right.
the narrative that they don't want, which is that if he doesn't succeed, it's like you've now made him into this kind of character that his success will basically be a read on where the
Right.
Democratic Party is, which is very bad. You don't want one person in a especially really blue area to
Yeah.
become this like you know, person that basically determines where the party is going. And so again, I think their equivocation at the beginning made it really difficult. I think at this point, it's, they just got to endorse him and just move on. Because the more that we keep doing, this, oh, is he going to endorse him? Is he going to not? It creates more of a story.
Yeah, and I think also maybe they could take the opportunity to sort of just reframe, which I think Hochul tried to do a little bit, what an endorsement is, which is really to say, I want this person to win of the options, right? Like it's as simple as that. But I think, there's this fear that by endorsing somebody, you endorse every tweet, every statement, every policy they ever said. And that's not really the case. And I think, it was an interesting move for Hochul to sort of write a New York Times op-ed endorsing him, basically saying, I still don't agree with his policies, but we agree on disliking Donald Trump. I don't know that that will serve her. Ultimately, we'll see. I think she was sort of trying to preempt Eric Adams dropping out and not wanting to then weigh in between Cuomo and Mamdani because, of course, Cuomo is probably closer to her on policy issues, but the last person on earth that she would like to see as mayor of New York City. So, an interesting dynamic there. Last question for you. Thank you so much for joining. And actually, Marge put it in the chat, which is the messaging on oligarchy and sort of what billionaires are doing to the country really the silver bullet for Democrats? Seems like a lot of people are coalescing around that as the answer and where Dems need to be sort of in this next chapter.
So I saw that comment. And I do agree, and there are a few reasons for that. The first being is right now in this country, you're seeing billions and billions of dollars going towards the AI revolution, and I think it's important for us to invest in this space because it's a technology that is clearly going to be changing our world. But what you are seeing at the same time is these AI companies keep begging for subsidies, keep begging for all these things from the federal government, and then what they do is they develop these data centers that are making electricity incredibly expensive. I was reading an article before this that in so many communities across the country, in rural communities, in red states, electricity is jumping up millions and millions of dollars in the state because these data companies are building these data warehouses to actually power all of these AI data centers. And then when you look at actually what these AI companies are building, they're actually not making this new technology that's going to help fix our medical system. It's going to
Right.
help fix our infrastructure systems. They made this new app called Sona, which is basically just a TikTok app where they're generating stupid videos of people throwing rocks and falling through bricks, like just actual slop, which actually shows that they are focused on enriching themselves, not helping anyone. And I think it's important Democrats talk about this because in 2 or 3 years from now, when we have a debate and we go on stage and all these people are on stage, everyone's trying to be president and everyone's talking about how their electricity has gotten so damn high because of Sam Altman and these billionaires. And Democrats don't have an answer to that question and haven't been consistently talking about how the biggest divide in this country isn't left versus right. It's actually up versus down.
Mhm.
And the top earners in this country are getting so many tax breaks through the Republicans and these AI companies, and they're just able to do whatever they want and enrich themselves. And then, yet, when you want free healthcare, it's a whole conversation. And we have to start debating, oh, can we do this? Can we not do this? Can we afford this? But then when they want their data center, it just instantly gets done. I think it's important to point out that for so many people in this country, getting what they want is super easy when you have a lot of money, but getting what you want when you're actually poor is so much harder. So I do think it's an important divide to bring up. And it's not the silver, there's no silver bullet in
Right.
politics. I think everyone wants to think that, oh, if we just talked about this one thing, everything, you know, gets super easier. There are many, different, components to make up a successful campaign. So I don't want to paint it like it's silver
No,
bullet.
yes, I hear
But
you.
I do think this is an inequality that is important to talk about, and it's continually getting worse.
I totally agree. I think Ro Khan has been effective at sort of framing it that way. And I think, it's one of those things that's super tangible and in recent memory to people because they just saw it happen with digital, right? And the internet and who won and lost from that really in the last just 2 decades. And it's really the same playbook happening, at hyper speed. So I think it's highly effective. Rotimi, thank you so much for joining. Where can folks find you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My Twitter is at underscore ROTIMIA at Twitter and at Instagram. And then also follow my stuff